Good evening and welcome to this BCom in Accounting webinar at Milpark Education. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. My name is Gareth Olivia. I'm the head of the School of Professional Accounting, and I'm joined, as you can see on your screen, by Judith Blanche, who I will introduce formally shortly. She's involved in all things on the BCom in Accounting, and the idea really today, or this evening I should say, is that we get together and chat about everything, anything that would be useful on the BCom in Accounting at Milpark. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. The advantage of a session like this, it is quite small, and so our process in terms of the use of this hour is that the benefit is if you leave the session at the end of the hour having got more information than you have now. So we keep things quite informal. I'm going to ask Judith a few questions. As I said, Judith was integrally involved in the development and now the delivery of the BCom in Accounting. We're just going to chat. As you guys will see in the sidebar of your screen, there's a place where you can drop comments. We've got Hanley in the background. We've got Verona in the background, one of our program managers who will be asking questions. If there are things that would be useful that you don't know that you'd like to know, pop it in the chat, and me and Judith can also chat through that. But as I say, if we can leave at the end of the hour knowing more than you know now, give you a little bit of a sense of the DNA of the BCom in Accounting, then it'll have been a win. So please don't hesitate to pop some questions there. I think Hanley's also included the email address if you would like to email and ask any questions about the Milpark BCom Accounting. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And I think really the objective of this session is we are, of course, going to be taking and opening applications and registrations for our second semester intake of our BCom in Accounting. You may or may not know it. We have an intake every semester or every 6 months for those who would like to start our BCom in Accounting. And the BCom in Accounting, as we always say, is for students who would like to enter that journey towards qualifying as chartered accountants. We've got the whole journey all the way from the undergraduate BCom in Accounting all the way through to the postgraduate, which is CICA accredited, and then that goes through to CICA's board exams, which is the full process of qualifying as a CA. So we're really excited kind of about this program, to chat to you guys about it, to give you more information, and yeah, that's where we're going to be taking things over the next hour. So Judith, I've kind of, before I go off on too much of a tangent, I've kind of introduced you very loosely as the person who's involved in all things BCom in Accounting. Maybe you could give us a bit of background from your side. You were with us on day one in the BCom in Accounting, and I suppose for those who don't know, we've launched the BCom in Accounting at the beginning of this year, but there was a lot more that went into the BCom but before that. So you were really involved in kind of the DNA, the starting up of the BCom Accounting, and really injecting into the program the key ingredients that you thought were necessary. So maybe you can give us just a little bit of background on you, who you are, what's been important to you in developing the BCom, and then we can chat from there.
No, thanks a lot, Gareth. Yeah, it's always exciting to talk to prospective students and to students. So I'm very excited about these few minutes that we have tonight. I think what is important, perhaps, if one thinks about one's life, there's always key moments. And for me, one of the key moments, so I've been in CA education for 15 years or so, but you always have 1 or 2 or 3 pivotal moments on that journey. And for me, one was actually on the research side, when I actually enrolled for my PhD, where I actually went a bit away from the numbers side and actually delved a bit into the philosophy of education. And that, sent me in a trajectory that at some stages might sound odd and foreign to other people. But I really, it invited me in, philosophy and teaching pedagogy and thinking broader than just technical knowledge. And I think that was so important for me. And that's why it was such the invitation to Milpark to a certain extent for myself was sort of, that's the logical space to move into, because the culture and the values that Milpark and CA Connect had established over the years just really draw on all of those research aspects that I've explored. So, thinking about more than just the technical, thinking about creating a community and focus on values and responsible leadership, much broader than just, whether someone can do some number crunching. So I think really what Milpark is trying to do with this program and what has been achieved so far on the PGDA side from CA Connect, it's really at the heart for me of everything, and for me it sparked from my research into philosophy of education, which goes beyond just the technical. I think CAs, it's quite easy sometimes to think about some of the technical aspects, even though it's complicated, but we can master that. But sometimes when we have to think about reflexivity, think about how we connect this critical thinking, how we make people curious about certain aspects, sometimes it's easy to just accept. And I think that's what makes education and this program so exciting, is those opportunities that we get to create and where we can co-learn and co-create with our students. So yes, I been in academia, love the possibility of joining Milpark and embedding some of those, how do we develop certain attributes in our students, which you don't always get the opportunity to really make such significant changes, at established universities where, it takes a long time to instigate changes. So for me, it was very exciting. And the last 5 or 7 years that I've been on the journey towards more broader, holistic education rather than just a mere technical. For me, it was just such a worthwhile journey and a journey of meaning making. And now I've got the opportunity to share that with students and colleagues, which are awesome.
No, that is awesome to hear. And Judith, I suppose what a lot of students might be interested in, and guys, please put some comments there or questions if there's anything specific you're interested in. But I suppose we throw around these terms like co-creating and walking a journey with students and those kinds of things. But I suppose for students, I guess either coming from a high school matric background, or I guess on the other hand, working adults who perhaps haven't studied for a while, what do you think almost that journey looks like and feels like for students joining the program? There's of course hard work and rigor required in the program, but there's also an element of, I suppose, the Milpark staff and lecturers want to walk with the students. And so what's your impression in terms of almost day one, week one? What does it feel like being part of the BCom in accounting?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think, we've sometimes has a perception, when you dream about the program, you've got a perception. When you then develop the program, you've got a perception. But, the value really lies in what the student actually experienced. And I think, we've only started with our first cohort, but it sometimes when you look back and you think, it feels like we've ticked a lot of the boxes that we aimed for. And I think how it's different, or how I feel it's different to other places that I've been involved with, and what my experience was from the student feedback and the interactions. When we kicked off, I was literally in every live session, just so eager to engage with our students. And I think what they can expect to a certain degree is real people that pitch up and are eager to explore with them. And that means we're not necessarily spoon feeding, but we are there and we sort of provoke and encourage each of our students to discover for themselves. And we, alongside them, we're helping along this journey, but we're not doing the journey for them. Meaning that we want to enable them to, develop and have the critical thinking and the curiosity for themselves. But then they shouldn't feel alone. And I think sometimes in an online environment, you might think you're alone. And I think therefore it's so important for us that it's we're just real people, and sometimes we're operating in technology, so sometimes something will go wrong, but then we just pivot, because we're not going to abandon the journey if something doesn't work out immediately, and then we just come up with another way of support. But I think what students felt in the first cohort, I would love to think so, and based on the feedback, is that we were there and we were real when we were there, and we encouraged them to participate. The invitation is there for engagement. We've got synchronous and asynchronous context. And now there's a part of the journey that a student needs to get through the material to a certain degree. But we offer so many other opportunities through the synchronous sessions where they can meet up in small groups with their fellow classmates, where the lecturers are there to talk with them and through them, and sort of provoke them with certain activities and questions to just explore whether what do they really make of the content of the week. We very sort of have other tools like discussion forums, and you create a community through the Yammer platform. So I think sometimes you would imagine that in an online space it might be more lonely than at the traditional residential university, but I think we've got a balance here where there's flexibility and you work on your own pace. There's milestones, so we encourage you to keep up with a certain space, but you've got a lot of flexibility in that. But that's the one half, and the other half is the community bit, where we sort of want to keep the momentum. So we check in, and we've got our live sessions, and you've got access through consultation, and we respond to Yammer, and we make connections between the students, and they've really made friends. And sometimes we ask the question now, okay, but now we move on to different modules, and then the question is, but will that relationships last? And it's just like, yeah, because at the normal residential university, students start on a journey, they change degrees, but they still keep in touch. And to a certain degree, I can already see that we've got students that have connected in the first few weeks. And they will, I'm convinced, they'll keep in touch and encourage each other. And I think that's when something has worked, is besides the fact that the students experience us as being real, you could see that they already built connection with each other. And I think that is really a testimony to an environment where we just encourage real participation.
Yeah, no, 100%. And if I was to almost overlay or add on to some of what you're saying, I mean, for those of you guys who don't know, a lot of my work originally was done in the postgrad space. So I've done a lot of work in our postgraduate diploma in accounting and our bridging courses, which are our postgraduate programs, which lead almost directly into SAICA's board exams. And the BCom, of course, flows into that. And kind of when that kicked off around 2019 in Milpark, and very similar narrative to what Judith is saying in terms of, I think the belief was always that education happens primarily through people. The last thing we want this to feel like is that it's you and your computer and you're all alone. So those words that Judith, I suppose, you use are community, relationships, together. And I suppose an indicator that as a program it would be getting it wrong would be if, I don't know, students were to reach out and no one was to reply. If they were to look to chat to a lecturer and they weren't available. If they were to post something in some kind of discussion forum and no one would reply. But I think what we really aim to do is to connect students, to connect staff, and to get that real feeling that we're together, almost like you were going to a campus, I suppose. So a lot of students who've started coming in the postgrad have actually started choosing to come to this online program, even though they could have gone to a residential university at a campus, because they almost see it as almost the best of both worlds, where there's almost the connection and the reality that you'd normally associate with actually going to class, actually going to school, actually going to lectures. But then almost also something we must touch on shortly, Judith, is also that flexibility, that it's almost the best of those both worlds. So you've got the connection and realness and ability to learn and interact, but coupled with, well, I've got my life and I've got stuff that I can't necessarily just attend all day, every day and commit kind of all the time. And I think that's sort of the world that we're moving into as a community, where there's more flexible work, where there's more flexible life, where we are able to do things from different places, and almost this idea that learning can happen not separately from life, but in a lot of ways integrated into life. And so therefore there's the possibility that people who live in remote locations can be studying, people who are also working can study, and just people who have family responsibility, people who are professional sports people, all those different combinations of life can almost lead into this, but I think in a way that people don't feel like they're compromising, because I think that education options have always existed, that, well, you can study distance or you can study correspondence, but then it was always this feeling of, well, I'm not quite getting that learning experience that I'd want. And hopefully in almost combining these two worlds with the connection and the authenticity and relationships of contact education combined with the flexibility of distance education, we hopefully kind of get to those best of both worlds. And kind of that flexibility, Judith, is maybe something we should also explore, because I think something that makes the BCom in accounting quite unique is the different workloads and the different almost options that students have in order to tackle the BCom. And I mean, it's a tricky one to phrase, I guess, because we don't want to downplay the fact that, of course, the BCom in accounting is hard work, and students need to put in a lot of time and energy into this thing. But I suppose there's also that acknowledgement that our lives are complicated, our lives are busy, and therefore different people need different flexibility. Is the workload, the full workload, the half workload, something you can unpack a little bit for us in terms of how students might think about making that choice?
Yeah, no, I think that's very important, that we unpack that, because that's something that's a bit different if you compare it to, let's say, a residential university. I think what is if we have to think, obviously there's formal answers, based on notional hours and credits. There's quite a significant theoretical scientific answer one can get to it, but based on a average type of aspect of when we look at it, if we consider a full load, then we roughly compare it to I would like to say a full job, meaning an office week of 40 hours. Some students that might be more, for some students it might be less. So I think the one thing is a full load on this type of intensive degree is, it's fairly intense with regards to the fact that we think if you have to do a lot of practice questions, a lot of exercises, then it might lead to a 40-hour week for you. But if we really think about, content that you engage with on the virtual learning system, then one will roughly say per module, it will take you, let's say, 5 to 6 hours. So the 40 hours you can see is clearly allowing ample time for all your activities and practices and your own reading and reflection to be done. Now, if we compare that to a half load, what we would call a half load, then you would roughly, it's a bit, because we make use of a foundational module, which makes the semester one a bit of a tricky semester based on a foundational module and then several individual modules. Your semester starts a bit, I want to say, focused on one module on its own. So everyone will have that module. But then it will split roughly into additional 3 modules or 2 modules. So you can roughly see, based on whether you choose, we call it option 1 or 2, when you make your choice with what subjects you want to start. But because of the fact that it's 5, it's an uneven number. So you will get a 3 or a 2 after you completed the introduction or foundational module. So you will roughly think it would be something between 15 or 20 or 20 to 25 hours in a week, based on whether you choose to start with the 3 modules or the 2 modules. But again, per module, the interactive time is probably 5 hours or so. The rest is your additional exercises, practice, and you can then roughly work out from there what half load would mean. It's not exactly 20 hours versus 40 hours based on the 3-2 split, but it's much more easy if you have a full-time job, I would imagine that it might be complex and difficult to have a full load plus a lot of requirements for your family and your job requirements. That might be tough. But it all depends on your personal circumstances. But if you've got a part-time and some scope and availability, the full load might be the best bet for you. If you're young and you just left school, going into full time and take the full load, that might be best suited. I think what is crucial for the program, or for us and our engagement with potential students, is the fact that we've got 2 intakes, and the fact that we offer a half and a full load just gives that added aspect of flexibility. That's besides the fact that you can engage with the content in a flexible manner, because you can do it in the evenings. You can focus it on Saturdays and Sundays if that's what you wish to do. But I think there's 2 layers of flexibility here. It's the half load versus the full load, plus the fact that you can access the material. Although we've got weekly milestones, you've got 10 days or so to engage with a week's worth of material at your own time and at your own leisure.
And I think, Judith, just to pick up on one point of what you were saying, and kind of what I think almost came into the design of the full and half workload, we've been quite particular not to say full-time and part-time. So, and the idea with the full and half workload is, I think, from our point of view, to let students know what the work requirement is. So, I mean, we say very roughly, if you take the full workload, you're looking at 40 hours a week. If you take the half workload, you're looking at between 20 and 25 hours a week. But those are flexible hours. So you need to do those hours. And I think the real assessment that students need to make is in terms of their lives, what they are able to free. And that's why, for example, if there was a student who was working full-time, who was studying, I don't know, in the evenings and weekends, we wouldn't say you can't do the full workload. We'd say it takes 40 hours, but if you're working, just be very careful that you know how your life is planned so that you can work relatively intensively on weekends, and then, I don't know, probably some hours in or mornings, for example, during the weekdays. And likewise with the half workload, just because you are not working, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't take the half workload, because some students also just prefer to study at a slower pace over a longer period. And so the issue of this workload, this full versus half workload, is really a question of putting the ball in students' courts in terms of how they would like to study. And I think that's what almost the invitation we'd extend to students. So what we would love to play, I think, the role as is almost the counselor, the sounding board, the people who are able to advise students in terms of like 40 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours, but the actual choice must sit with the student. And for example, when a student was to apply to the BCom in accounting, we're not going to prescribe to them, oh, you working, therefore you must do half workload. Oh, you full-time, therefore you must do full workload. It's about saying, what does my life look like? How flexible am I? How not flexible am I? How do I want this to play out? And overlay that on all the things that are in your life: family responsibility, work responsibility, anything else. And as I said, it could be professional sports people, it could be any number of things. And it's almost our responsibility as educators in the program and facilitators of the process to say, well, we will create this flexibility. Now it's almost kind of up to you to determine how you'd like to use that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Have you seen students use the half or full workload in any creative ways or aspects where you've seen it work or not work?
I must admit we haven't delved into the data that much, but in the conversations that we had in the live sessions, it was clearly that the students really made the decisions based on their I would like to say their life situations, and that was the final and informing decision for the majority of our students in the first cohort. I think sometimes what is also important is if the prospective student, wants to know more about, what the considerations should be. That's also drop, I think, in the comments, the email address is there. Just drop an email, and then we can explore with the student. Obviously, we can't make decisions on behalf of students, but we can engage and have a conversation and perhaps point out things that impact on availability and on decisions like this, because I think we've seen what are those things, and I think it's about priorities. Because a lot of it is about life as well. As you say, you might have someone that just don't want to work on weekends at all, which is perfect. And then you make a certain informed decision based on that. So I think it's a very individual choice, but I think if they reach out and talk to us, we can point them into just considerations to think about.
No, 100%. Judith, maybe something to explore, but a bit more also on top of that. You've kind of dropped in the technical education terms around synchronous and asynchronous sessions. Maybe go into that just in a little bit more detail for students kind of wondering, kind of you register on the BCom Accounting kind of day one. How would they think about planning their lives? Like, what is it? How would material almost be delivered to them? When is there almost sessions that you have to attend at this time, and when is there flexibility? Like, how does that, and maybe just define those terms, synchronous and asynchronous, and so we can get a sense of exactly what you mean on that.
I'm laughing because it's actually such a good question or comment, Gareth, because we have students in our first cohort that thought we're offering it a bit differently than how it actually played out. So it's actually good one has this conversation. Okay, just on the terminology, so let's just get that out of the way. So asynchronous, if we just tone it down into layman's language, it means you're going to access the material as a student. It's going to be there, and you're going to work through it on your own time. So you don't need.
What would that look like, Judith? Is that
okay.
Text? Is it videos? Like.
Yeah, no. Let's explore that. So that would be all the material that you would be able to access on our online learning platform, our VLS. That's just another terminology. You can ignore that, but we use Canvas. But if you've been at other institutions, a lot use Blackboard or Moodle. So, but we use Canvas. So what it means is you're going to log on. It's an online platform, and there you will find a variety of aspects. You will have written text, so there would be written text on the platform that you can read through. You will have bite-sized recordings, so there would be a video explaining certain aspects, and we will have then a variety of activities. So some would be weekly quizzes. Some might be participation on a discussion forum, some would be reflection. So that's just to sort of get an idea how you've engaged with the material and the content of that week. So asynchronous, in your own time. You don't need a lecturer or anybody else. You do it on your own time, and it's there, and you can access it when and how and whenever you want to, and how many times you want to read or listen to it or do an exercise. So it's text, it's short bite-sized videos, and it's activities. The activities can be a variety. On the other hand,
the overarching concept, I suppose, with that is the asynchronous material is material you can do whenever you want. It's according to your life.
Yes, absolutely. So if you are thriving at 12 at night till 3 in the morning, then you go for it. If you need to be fresh and you need 6 a.m. till 9 a.m., that's all good. And I think what is nice, not that that's now the question, but I think what is nice if students, what is interesting is you, and we've seen it in the conversations where students, you have the night owlers and you've got the early risers, and you could see how they start figuring out who's going to support who. Someone just wants another person to be online at the same time and have someone to have a conversation with. So we could see that happening in our first cohort, where they sort of figured out who's working at what time, so that at least there's other people also. But yes, asynchronous, it's there on the platform. You access it when and whenever. To a certain degree, so then we offer what we say synchronous. But the synchronous, I want to say, we can also talk about broader support, but let's just focus first on the synchronous from a teaching perspective. That's when we sort of, when there's a specific time, and I'm going to counter that because just after I said specific time, I'm going to say we record that. So it means you can also access it actually at any time. But I think the advantage of attending the synchronous session, and we're not saying you have to attend. So synchronous means it's at a specific given time, and there's a specific time, and we all engage in that moment. So it's not necessarily at your own time, as in when you
like
want.
As an example, this is a synchronous session.
This is synchronous. We've slotted it at 5, but we also see in the top one it said it's been recorded, so people can access it later again. The advantage of being in the room, if you think about the live session, is you can just pop your question and you can engage with other people that's in the session. Now, there's equal learning that can happen from observing a session where people reflected and asked questions, because you can do that reflection when you actually hear the question and you think, oh yeah, that's a good question, maybe I will reflect about it. So there's still a lot of learning that can happen from watching the recording afterwards, but there's something about the community in the moment that offers when we actually have the live session, because in that moment you experience it with others, where if you listen to the recording, you might get certain reflection points and considerations for yourself, but you might miss out on that in that moment. We were all together in one room, even though it's a virtual room. So on the synchronous side, it's that live session that we offer. So that would be per module. On a weekly basis, we've got 2 slots per module. It's normally a repeat session, so it's just spread out through the day. One session is roughly around lunchtime. One session is roughly about this time, so early evening, just leaving work. So we're trying to, even in that, be flexible in it's either a lunchtime or a early evening. But we also understand that could be complex. You might be leaving office, or it's the time your kids needs to be bathed and get food or get ready to bed. So there's obviously a lot of pressures just from normal life. But that's a moment of a synchronous where we could. There's others as well, in the fact that we've got consultation, so you can book a slot with your lecturer and you can meet up, and then we have a team session and we chat, and we've got videos on and you see whatever is in our backgrounds, and we're just real people meeting up and talking about the content. I think what's important perhaps on the live sessions, what we call live sessions, but the synchronous sessions, is we don't teach necessarily new material or teach an hour. The purpose is not teaching. The asynchronous material can stand on its own. The purpose of that is much more, it's community, it is getting a sense, it's support, it's asking questions, using the content that was there, nothing new, but you can ask very relative different questions from session to session, and students can bring questions. We can use what was in the discussion forum, so there could be a difference in the sense that, let's say your first session is on a Monday and then the next session is on a Thursday. It could have popped up new questions in the discussion forum that the students ask and answer sometimes themselves and just ask. So it's a lot of bringing in questions and provoke that thinking and building that community aspects, which is broader than the technical that you've seen in the asynchronous. But it's not that if you don't participate now, I don't have the necessary technical material so that I can be successful. And I think that's important. So roughly, if we look at our asynchronous and synchronous, asynchronous, it's there at your leisure, access it. The synchronous, you need to book a slot with your lecturer and you need to attend the live session. It's only going to be live in those 2 slots, but it gets recorded so you can watch it afterwards. But it means it's a specific moment in time. So that's roughly the distinction, but there's broader things that we also offer. Maybe you can elaborate on some of those if you're interested, Gareth.
No, well, I was just going to touch on it. I think that's we'll move on to that, Judith. What I was going to add, I think it's interesting just hearing you speak about almost all the application aspects about the program, because I think where we've seen a lot of almost chartered accounting education heading to, and you kind of alluded to it at the beginning when you were talking about your journey through education and kind of how I think you looking at education a lot more holistically, and accounting these days isn't actually just all the number crunching and journal entries and almost the stereotypical accounting. A lot more of it is the problem solving, the strategic thinking, the collaboration with students, the working together in online environments, and just almost embracing a new way of working, embracing, I suppose just that problem-solving, creative mindset that I think is what chartered accountants need to do these days. I think a lot of people see the chartered accountants as the kind of leaders in responsible business. And that doesn't come by just doing journal entries and just doing auditing and just doing kind of the books for the month. It comes from really having a deep understanding of technical material, but on top of that, overlaying this ability to collaborate, this ability to think big, this ability to bring people along and lead teams. And I think that's why the design of the program is so important in these synchronous sessions that you're speaking about. And of course, we know that life happens. So sometimes students watch the recording and that sort of thing. But the reason, I suppose, why we'd encourage students to attend the synchronous sessions is because that's almost where the magic happens in the moment. And that's the real reflection of life. And that's how we get a sense of how this theory from the asynchronous material actually is applied, and we can ask those what if questions. What if this? What if that? How would this change? And again, you can watch those in a recording, but in general, it's amazing if students can attend the live session so that they can be part of that co-creation, problem-solving, creative process, because that's really where we see almost the magic happening for chartered accountants. And because the world is moving on from accountants and chartered accountants as these technical gurus into more of these business leaders, I think that's where that magic happens. But I think also why for us it's so important to reflect that in the design of the course. And it's not just a course where we say, well, here's your textbook, go and read. It's a case of, well, yeah, there is a textbook, and yeah, there are videos, and yeah, there is some theory that we need to get our heads around. But also, let's think about how we work in this world together. I think there's also project work in the program where students work together, and lecturers obviously walk with the students and work in that process. But I think we try to create this ecosystem or community that you speak about that I guess is reflective of the type of working world that students are moving into. Would you agree with kind of that?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think what's important, and one can maybe mention it, just one of the things that perhaps we use, which I think is unique. Obviously, again, it's not compulsory. It's also the option for students, as is the live sessions, but we think there's a lot of value in it. And it's the fact that we do the Gallup Strengths Finder with our, on a first year cohort. The opportunity to know yourself a bit better, but also to have an awareness of other people's. And just imagine, we've only started out, but I'm so excited to think, when we actually get into, challenging project work and people that needs to collaborate, how actually, that scaffolded knowledge of the Gallup Strengths Finder is actually going to enable students to actually, because it isn't easy, it's very, sometimes people think assessment of a group project it's much more easy because you can, I don't know, if you want to hide away, you can hide away a bit, and you think, I want to prove myself in a test that I can do it. But the challenge of group work, besides the fact that you've got all these voices, which is awesome because people, ideas bounce from each other, but the challenging bit is actually sometimes that difficulty of navigating the relationships and the responsibilities within that group, and the complexities associated with that. And if you think about, the psychocompetency framework and where the profession is heading, there's a lot of those aspects in the competency frameworks of attributes that they really want, that collaboration and teamwork and being able to lead, and somewhere you need to practice and learn that. And I think the fact that we actually offer the opportunity for students to engage and do the strength finder, get to know their top strengths, and then sort of learn about valuing different strengths, because I think that's it's sometimes so easy to just think, oh well, people operate different than me and I can't work with people like that. But if you actually start to realize how complementary all of those strengths could be, if you just know and understand and value each in their unique, complex uniqueness, and I think that's very valuable. So I think something for me, that's where we were intentional. I don't think you would necessarily go and find such offerings in any program. But I think it's because for us, it's really about that holistic development of yes, we want CAs, so they've got technical skills, great. But we really want people that can make a difference. And the facts are out there. We don't have to hide about it. The majority of business leaders have some sort of financial qualification, and in the South African context, a lot of that times it's a CA or a CIMA, but very often dominated by the CA profession. So if we really want to change South Africa and the context and the realities, then you need the technical skilled business leader to make those ethical and responsible decisions that can protect the planet, but can also consider the implications of decisions on the broader stakeholders. And I think we are intentional. That's the reason we have the live sessions. That's the reason why our attributes for the program are very specifically about curiosity and critical thinking and confidence. You won't see a lot of times confidence, but it's that confidence in collaborating and really having that critical, and critical is not negative. It's a reflexivity of thinking about the whys and the what ifs. And yes, people are telling me it's like this, but is it really the truth, or is it just someone's perception? That curiosity, that's the only way that we can solve problems, because the problems are almost the same. We need to think about new ways to solve the same problems. Hence, we need to start, provoking people in thinking a bit wider. So yes, I 100% resonate what you've said, resonate with me.
Okay. Judith, I can hear the students thinking and saying, these are great words to say: curiosity and collaboration and strengths finder and appreciating people and problem solving and all that. But one thing we know that students want to know about is the tests. How do we get tested? How do we test all this stuff? What does it look like when it comes to, I suppose, being assessed on this program? How would and also, sorry, Davi, I also want you to know that I haven't forgotten your question. I am getting to it. I'm just layering things up a little bit, and I think I'll come to your question in the next question or two. But Judith, maybe you can speak a little bit just about almost that assessment process, because this is hard stuff to assess. When you talk about curiosity, creativity, reflectiveness, all those things, like what does the assessment of that look like? What will students need to do or demonstrate in the BCom Accounting?
Yeah, that is a brilliant question, Gareth. And I think sometimes you need to think about things that are measurable, and not all things necessarily are measurable in a traditional sense. So some of the, let's say, the reflexivity, a lot of that one would hope develops in layers in individuals over their 3 or 6 year or 9 year journey with us. And I think, yes, there's going to be assessments that are traditional assessments where we just, figuring out whether you at least know your accounting standards or your tax law. Some of those aspects are just like that. But where you can ask it a bit differently if you think about assessment, so is where you now start to ask them in a very particular context, or you create a scenario or a business case study where there might be a journal entry, but we're actually asking it from a different perspective, or we're throwing it around. You can, besides the fact that we will, allow for opportunities for recordings of a presentation. We will have group activities. We also want students to really participate with regards to industry knowledge. We think a bit about some gamification aspects. There's a lot of other ways than the traditional assessment. But if you just think about the technical content, if you put that within a very particular context, and you ask why there, and you ask a discussion and an analysis type of question, or a report writing. If you think about something simplistic like digital, people can just say, well, it's the same as number crunch, it's just now on Excel. But if you actually just ask that from an analysis perspective, or from issue a report, or make an analysis of a report, which is based on, let's say, a spreadsheet full of numbers, making sense, that is a strategic, critical analysis, which was not, do you know how to do a VLOOKUP or a pivot table? But underlying, we've got that technical knowledge. But we ask it from a different perspective to layer that critical thinking and that scaffolding. Does it make sense? Or
no, I think it does. Maybe that I can maybe summarize in a different way, and you can tell me if I've got it. So students would still be doing, I suppose, written tests. They would be online. They would be doing project work. They'd be doing written collaborate, or both group work and individual work. But almost the way the lecturers will walk with them on the educational journey would be to equip them to be able to respond to those assessments through a different viewpoint. So yeah, for example, then I think it's a good example that you give in terms of students wouldn't necessarily be asked to do 2 + 2. It would be, maybe I've chosen a bad example here, but if it was 2 + 2, how do we think about that? Or if there was a business scenario, not almost re-say what was in a textbook, but to think critically or creatively about the information or the theory, rather than just saying, well, I learned this off by heart and therefore I'm going to give it back to you. You're really going to walk a journey with the students where you ask them, or you encourage them and facilitate a process where they can ask questions that are difficult, that are thinking carefully about it, and just encouraging an environment where there's problem solving and just a different way of looking at the world, so that when they do get out into the world, they are able and equipped to ask those types of questions. Would that be kind of a fair rephrasing of it in some ways?
No, that is a fair phrasing, because that's exactly that. We teach the psychocompetency framework. So the content at every university that offers the program, it's exactly, the content is exactly the same. It's how you deliver that content, and then that how is very closely linked to assessment. Because we just want to measure your progress. Yes, at the end you need to measure, but it's a motivator to demonstrate your thinking. I always, sometimes students feel like, this is the chance for, I don't know, lecturers to court students out. For me, it's like, it's such an exciting opportunity, because I've got the opportunity to showcase my thinking, and then I can have a discussion. I think that's the other thing that's quite important is when you ask assessments in a way that you really promote critical thinking and curiosity. So you're throwing it a bit around and you don't zone in just on the technical. I think what it also allows is when a student actually receives their let's say their feedback on their attempt, that allows immediately for a very nice conversation of engaging in where this was the thinking. Okay, here, can you think that this is actually crucial and you didn't consider this? In what circumstances do you think you would consider X, Y, and Z? And I think that allows, and that's why I say co-creation, because I think there's opportunities there where a lecturer will actually realize, I haven't considered that at all. It wasn't in my, frame of mind to even consider that. And actually, that's very valued. And I think that's why we say co-creation is there is, yes, on the technical, I think, we're all chartered accountants, and so we know the field a bit. Doesn't mean we all know it, but we know a bit about the technical. But I think there's a lot about life and life circumstances, and therefore the implications on decision making and consequences, which we all can learn from each other. And I think a different way of assessment that allows actually for some grayness and more than just a right wrong, because the answer is right wrong, but the thinking behind the answer. Even if you come up with a numeric answer, what was your thinking behind that? And if you made an error somewhere along the line, is that really the end of it, or was your thinking actually logically sequenced?
And I think it's such an important point that you raised, because I think so often when we think about tests or assessments or exams and all those words that make us excited, that I think often strikes fear in the hearts of everyone who's going through it, is I think it's so important to almost position the idea of assessments in a program. And I think, Judith, what you're speaking about there is, I suppose, what we'd refer to as formative assessments, where it's assessments with the purpose of learning and reflecting and teaching. And I think that's the greatest role that those assessments can play, because they're there almost as a tool to diagnose how everyone is progressing along the pathway, and then for lecturers and to engage with students in, okay, this is where things went well, this is where things didn't go so well. What was your thinking process here? Did you look at it from this point of view? Oh, maybe I didn't look at it from that point of view. And then to go through that journey where we on it together, because I think often in education where we misposition almost the roles of students and lecturers is, I think so often students think, oh, the lecturer is there to catch them out. And that's where I think we're very deliberate, where we're saying this is a partnership, and it must be a partnership. The student must contribute their aspect, the lecturer must contribute their aspect, but at the end of the day, we all want everyone to pass. That is the outcome. The last thing in the world the students want is, the lecturers want is for the students not to pass. They want to be there to walk the journey with students, to enable them. Obviously, the lecturers can't learn for the students, but for sure, we want to be with the students on the journey to learn. I'm going to pivot a little bit into Davi's question. Davi, you were asking about the second and third year modules, and the reason I've left it a little bit later in the session is because I wanted to give a little bit of context just for everyone in the session in terms of where kind of how the program has been developed. To give you a little bit of history, Milpark's accounting program that started in 2019 where Milpark launched the postgraduate diploma in accounting. And just to, again, to take another step back, basically the process to qualify as a chartered accountant, for those who don't know, is basically to do a 3-year BCom in accounting, and then to do a 1-year postgraduate diploma in accounting. So you basically do 4 years of study. After that, you go into SAICA's first board exam. SAICA then has a second board exam, and kind of probably about, I think, there's a bit of a combination with work as well, a training contract with a firm. But basically, after 7 years, that would be the qualification to fully become a chartered accountant. And of those 7 years, the last 3 years, at least, sometimes before as well, if you want to, but you would be earning and working at the same time as you do that. But that's basically the journey. So Milpark launched only the postgraduate diploma in accounting in 2019. So up until this year, 2023, all the students who've joined Milpark Education to be chartered accountants up to the end of 2022 joined from other undergraduate universities. We obviously knew that was something we needed to build on. It made sense in a lot of ways for us to launch the postgraduate first, because then students would come to us and go straight into the board exam. But of course, we wanted to also launch the BCom in accounting. So our BCom in accounting, kind of as Judith was speaking to, launched for the first time at the beginning of this year, 2023, and so we're now into our second intake for that we kind of chatting to you guys about. But basically, the way the BCom in accounting will roll out is that the first year modules will roll out in 2023, the second year modules will roll out in 2024, and the third year modules will roll out in 2025. So over that 2023 to 2025 period, the whole BCom will then launch with intakes every 6 months. So basically, there's the opportunity to join every 6 months. So a question, and I think, Donnie, again, I'm getting to your question, but I'm just layering up the logic so we can make sense of it. But a lot of students at the beginning of 2023, when the BCom launched, were asking questions around, oh, if I've studied, say, for example, first year at another university, can I join Milpark? And that kind of option will be available in time. But because 2023 launched with only the first year launching, and as I say, second year in 2024, third year in 2025, those second and third year modules weren't available yet. So from, for example, 2024, students will potentially be able to go straight into second year. And from 2025, obviously subject to all the requirements, students could theoretically go directly into the third year, but that hasn't been an option yet in 2023 because we haven't rolled out the full BCom in accounting. So Darby, to get to your question eventually, you were interested in almost the module map over the 3 years of the BCom in accounting, and those first year modules were published. And it sounds like you were almost interested in the second and third year modules and what those would look like. Judith, could you comment on how Dani would find out more about how those second and third year modules would look, and potentially how he could get more information?
Yeah, I think I'm going to answer it from two aspects. I think it's safe to say, there's a lot of procedures and processes to go through before we issue a document to the public, which we think is 100% encapsulating all the aspects. So I would roughly say that within the next 2 months, so before the middle of the year, before we start with our second intake, all the information for the year 2 and 3 modules will probably be rolled out at in one go. So we deliberately made the choice. We go with year 1, and then we go with year 2 and 3 in time for people who considers to join us in 2024 and 2025. So on the website, the information should be in place roughly before the start of the second semester. So I would say very safe bet to think about 1 July. Also possible to just show your interest, drop a email, and we can share the information the moment we upload it onto the website. So that's the one side on the practicality of when we, sort of officially open the gates for year 2 and 3 consideration. So that would be roughly July. From just the perspective, I think if you looked at the fact sheet of year 1, I think it is clear that we do it slightly different. It's still this the psychocompetency framework content, but we roughly think more about the lines of a business process. Hence, we talk about themes, but those themes are actually going to end up, more or less being the module names. You're going to see it's just going to be issues with, the associate credits and et cetera, and specific content in it. But we very much have a theme dealing with strategy and leadership. We have a theme dealing with risk and governance, with decision-making and analysis, and then with financial reporting and compliance. And just based on those names, you can clearly see where, a traditional module like management accounting will be split, because it would be, some parts will be in analysis and decision-making, if you think about costing, budgeting, all of those type of topics. And then you have the strategy and leadership aspects, where a lot of the strategy comes either, some universities has a SMRMG type of module, some have it in their traditional management accounting. So there's a bit of a spreading and a repackaging of the traditional content, but it's still the traditional content. If you think about financial reporting and compliance, you can hear it's the financial accounting that's in the financial reporting module. And then we have 2 themes that sort of deals what we would say outside of the business. So we have our themes that sort of resonates with what's happening within a business. So those would be strategy, risk, governance, along those lines. But then it's also broader outside of that business. So there we would think about, let's say, firms that would, let's say, conduct an external audit, or do engagement like the taxation. So there would be aspects surrounding that. So very much the same technical content. The packaging is a slightly different way, but the themes that are in that fact sheet will ultimately be, and you'll see when we issue the complete fact sheet with the year 2 and 3, it will flow into that themes, which we've already mapped in that fact sheet for year 1.
And I think what's been amazing about some of the work that Judith and the BCom team has done is to most universities, I think, would almost do modules kind of spread over third year. And in some ways, I think for students, they sometimes feel almost quite disconnected. Like you're doing this module here in first year, this module in second year, this module in third year, and we don't always see the connections. I think one of the ways that Judith and the team have structured things is that there's quite clear through lines between year 1 into year 2 into year 3 of how these things progress, so that obviously the idea is that the foundations are set in year 1. You progress up in year 2 and you build on that. You progress up in year 3 and build on that. And then, of course, at a postgraduate level, you do the same. It's a building process of building foundations and appropriately scaffolding information and knowledge on top of each other. And I think that's almost the themes that Judith alludes to in terms of how these things almost stack on top of each other, so that we can see clear through lines. And I think as students experiencing this program, I think it'll be a lot of first year students, the feedback I hear is like, oh, I'm doing all these subjects in first year, but I don't really know where they're going. And I think that's something that the Milpark BCom and accounting students are going to feel quite strongly, is that cohesion of how this stacks. year on year. But it does sometimes look quite different to almost some of the traditional subjects or modules. So Darby, I hope that's sort of answered your question. Sorry, Judith, were you going to add on?
I just wanted to say, actually, on the foundation, and I think that's where you can already see the difference. Because if you think about another, or not any other institution, I never knew, or maybe it was just me, but I never knew why I was taking, let's say, economics 1, or stats 1. I didn't know. And what we're trying to do here, and maybe one day, Darby, you can tell us whether we were successful, is we don't want to teach you any content unless you can answer the why is it relevant for a business leader to know this, and where are they going to use it. And we're trying to do every single content linking it to that why, what's the value, and why do you need to know it, and why do you need to know it now. And I think that's quite important for us. And we hope, therefore, that at least students will always know that. They might not know how to do the journal, but at least they would know why they need to do the journal.
For sure. And I think that's when education becomes rewarding, hopefully. And I think that's why I think me and you, Judith, I think that's why we enjoy education, because I think that's when it becomes empowering. That's when it becomes exciting. It's when you understand the why. I think also a factor for success in this program that almost in a lot of ways I would measure it by, and I'd imagine you'd look to it as well, Judith, is, do students enjoy this program? Like, is it exciting? Do you wake up and think, oh man, I can't wait to get to my module for today and get through my reading, get through my videos, get to my live session? Because learning should be enjoyable. It should be empowering. It should be exciting. And I think that's hopefully something that's kind of baked into the DNA. Guys, I am aware that we're running out of time, and please excuse my doorbell ringing. That's part of the realness and life that we speak about. But Judith, kind of as we kind of wrap up, kind of last one or 2 minutes, and then we'll close things up. Any last comments that you'd add, just for students to think about, or any just closing remarks?
I think it's very tough making decisions. We cannot lie about that. People need to make a decision that's best for them. Am I excited about the offering that Milpark offers? Absolutely. I think it's unique. I think we've got the opportunity that we're building it from the bottom up. So we didn't just start, here is year 1, 2, and 3. We're doing the layering very calm and collectively. And we've really tried and connected the technical with the why and the reasoning and the attributes and the values and the decision making and the responsible leadership. And I think that would put students in a very good position. Top that with the fact that there's flexibility, but there's milestones. There's synchronous support when you need it. If you don't need it, you go on your asynchronous way. And I think the fact that we've got that, it's in a certain way the best of both worlds. But people need to trust and make a decision. But I think what we can offer is the fact that we were intentional, and we hope that will show, and we hope that students will have community. They can see values and they can experience the values rather than just being on the receiving end of just receiving some explanation of technical content, which isn't really meaningful or transformative or valuable.
Brilliant. No, I think those are wise words to wrap up on. Thanks, Judith, and thank you for this discussion and for joining me in this discussion. For me, it's been an interesting hour. And I started off the session, guys, for everyone who joined, just to say I hope this session would be useful if you know more now than you did at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So I hope you're leaving the session with something more that you came in. I hope the discussion's been useful to you. I think in the comment section, Hanley's included the email address if you do want any more information. Please, if there still are things on your mind after this discussion that we either haven't touched on or haven't quite answered, please do be in touch. And we want to kind of, even before you register, we want to walk with you as part of this journey of kind of making the best decisions for you and accommodating the things that can be accommodated as kind of we enter this, hopefully this partnership over the next few years. So thank you for joining us. And Judith, thank you again to you. And we look forward to seeing everyone again, hopefully in the near future.
Okay. And Anton, Gareth that already said he's excited to start. So
Brilliant.
we cannot
Brilliant.
wait to meet you, Anton. And thanks a lot, Gareth, Hanley, and all of you that joined. Keep well.
Thanks, everyone. Good evening.